Hello everyone and welcome to another video game review. Today we're taking a look at Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, a PlayStation 4 exclusive. I've been waiting quite some time for this game to come out. The game has faced quite a lot of delays. There was a lot of changes in the long run. A lot of the creative people changed in the process of development, and there was a lot of worry because the game suddenly didn't have the original Uncharted team working on its story and instead hired the team of The Last of Us, and there was worry because the tone of the game seemed so dark this time. Basically, there was a lot of doubts of how this game was going to turn out. Thankfully, I can tell you that you can be at ease. The game has turned out really great. So let's start off talking about the story. The story of the game follows in the footsteps of how Uncharted 3 ended, but at the same time it provides a lot of brand new background information about Nate's past life. We get to see a little bit of when he was a child, we get to know more about his history without spoiling too much details of course, but by now you should know that Sam is one of the new characters in the game, which is his brother, and his brother definitely becomes part important of the plot, to the point that I was concerned the game would focus too much on his brother. This is also a situation with the introduction overall of the game. The pacing of the introduction is a little bit slow paced because it takes a lot of time introducing you to the world and its story. So essentially the first hour of the game can be a lot of story and a lot of coverage that you have to take, rather than more focus on gameplay exciting action of temples. And the other detail about this introduction is that it feels pretty dark at first. Not only because of the story, but more about the coloring situations, like the tone of the areas that you're exploring are more urban. You're not really exploring the adventure yet, and that caused me a lot of concern at first overall with the story and the gameplay, but the game later keeps off and becomes really the Uncharted you know and love. And in the end, that intro that felt a little bit strange ultimately really pays off in the end for the game as a whole. This is actually Naughty Dog's most deep story in an Uncharted game personally. The other Uncharted games have a lot of story, yes, but here there was more focus on getting to know the characters more intimately. So I think overall in terms of story, I think this is definitely the most satisfying Uncharted game for me. I won't say this is the most exciting adventure Nathan Drake has gone into, because there has been more interesting landscapes overall and maybe more interesting temple places and such, but the overall story is so well connected to what's going on to these characters, and it's not just that we're searching for this treasure or whatever. This treasure and this whole adventure itself is really developing these characters as a whole. This adventure is part of them. This treasure is actually affecting them emotionally, all these characters in some way. In that perspective, the game is really great. Going along those lines, the visual presentation of the game is truly amazing. This is definitely one of the most beautiful, most stunning, and most realistic games that you can probably experience right now on the PS4. The hype visually is truly real on this game. You can definitely see that it's an amazing development from what it was on Uncharted 3 and 2. And it's really interesting because if you play the Uncharted trilogy now, Uncharted 3 and 2 still look really stunning, and the first game also got updated nicely too. But then you play this fourth game and you're even impressed more again how realistic and how cinematic it feels. It sometimes feels like I'm just simply watching a movie with real people. Now let's talk about probably the most important part of any video game, and it's the gameplay. The gameplay in Uncharted 4 is not completely different to what we already experienced in previous Uncharted games. But what I like about this Uncharted game in terms of gameplay is that it continues to evolve while staying true on what it is. And I mean evolve in the sense that they're always trying to make things have variety. The very first Uncharted game was a lot of combat, and some puzzles to solve. But in Uncharted 2, we saw how they spaced out a little bit the puzzles, and in Uncharted 3, they balanced out things even more with puzzles and combat, and they keep that same tradition here on this fourth game. We get new types of puzzles and we get some pretty nifty little mini games in the long run, like trying to steal a key car, playing a little James Bond. But most importantly, one of the gameplay changes of this game is the stealth. Now there's better stealth in this game because you can see enemies can detect you, but you can see how close they are to detect you. The game gives you time to run away from detection and survive and keep things stealth. If you manage to hide well enough, you can go back to being stealthy and enemies not seeing you again. So I think that definitely balanced out things a lot, and it definitely gives you a lot of opportunity on how to play the game. Rather than just combat your way through everything, you can actually now stealthily do things. And what's also great is that the companions that come with you, whether it's Sam or Sullivan, they all help you out throughout the adventure even more. They actually perform stealth kills for you, and if they're really close to the enemies, they'll help you out. They'll even notice you like, hey, you're going through this side and there's another guard over there, and they mark it for you. And that's another little great thing about the stealth. You can now mark down enemies much more easier. And that's something really great overall about the gameplay of Uncharted. You still have your epic moments where everything is crumbling down and stuff. You still got some really nice, interesting puzzles of tombs and temples to solve. They're not super hard, but they still manage to be interesting and challenging enough to make you keep interested, but not make you break your head and having to go to YouTube and find out how you do it. It's not that kind of puzzle. So I think overall in all those terms, the game is pretty balanced. Again, the beginning you might not have so much gameplay to do at first because the game is telling you a little bit of the story, but once it kicks off, it really kicks up. Oh, and another gameplay element that is added is that now you can control vehicles freely in some sections, like the Jeep moving car, and you can even drive a boat this time through some islands. That's another little two things that they add in that really made gameplay interesting. And there's also other little things to find. Before you would find small treasures, those are still back for collectibles and trophies and all that, but now you can find journals that Nate is going to add them to his book, and if you explore the area, Nate will make special notes in certain things if you spot them, and that really makes the experience feel more treasure hunting, but at the same time you're invested in trying to find the mysteries of this place and what happened. Again, the gameplay is not super revolutionary or anything super creative, but it's exciting, it's fun, and it really works all the way through. Now I want to talk a little bit about the music on this game, which I think is the element that was the most disappointing for me in the game. I know it's something pretty minor and the music is not terrible, but compared to the other Uncharted games, I feel like this music didn't really have much to help the adventure much. For starters, the iconic Nate's theme is not in the opening menu of Uncharted 4 at all. Instead, we get a very silent menu. I understand that we're going for a more darker tone approach kind of thing because of his last adventure, but at the same time, since this is supposed to be Nate's last adventure, it really is disappointing not to hear the traditional Nate's theme on the very last game all of a sudden, after seeing it for 3 games. Again, the soundtrack overall is not bad. It works for the most part, but it's not memorable. It's not something as iconic as the other previous ones that really fitted overall with the themes and locations we were visiting. Lastly, we have the multiplayer that makes a return finally after being absent from the Uncharted trilogy. And for the most part, the multiplayer works similarly like the previous Uncharted game. It's still fun, and they added a few elements from The Last of Us, like being able to revive your teammates and such. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that it's not very exciting as it was last time on Uncharted 3. I can't really tell you why I don't really find it much exciting. Perhaps it's the fact that I'm not really pleased with the fact that where there's a system of loot boxes where you have to get customizations and there's a lot of microtransactions involved to get your cool customization, and that's disappointing because I like the idea of being rewarded for what I'm playing, and I don't really feel like there's enough really reward for me playing this multiplayer game. At the same time, the maps are not bad, but they don't seem as interesting or as strategic like on previous maps on the Uncharted 3 multiplayer. That said, it still works, it's still fun, but it's not something I would come back to a lot. And it's fine because it's a simple addition to the game and it's not the main core of the game that's really important. Either way, I think Uncharted 4 is a really great, awesome game. I think it's definitely an example to follow on how you can really end a video game franchise. Most video game franchises don't really end or have a really good enough convincing proper ending, but I think that if you've been a long time running fan of this franchise, you'll be very much pleased with how this one ended. And it ended on a really high note. High production quality values everywhere, and a story that is definitely the deepest one they have ever pulled off. This is so far my favorite game of the year. I'm super excited what's to come next. In the meantime, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End gets a 9.5 out of 10. Thank you for watching this video game review. Be sure to check out my other video game reviews. Maybe next time I'll do Overwatch, maybe. Anyway, see you next time.